When discussing body art, we often immediately think of tattoos. In the next slides, we'll deal with three forms of permanent body modification, the first one being tattoos, something you probably can relate to. The one we're going to look at first is Maori tattooing. This is a group of people that have been tattooing for centuries. And the reason they tattoo is a way to show not only aesthetic beauty and pride in their bodies, but also to show their tribal identity and to give clues as to their history and their status in society. I personally don't have tattoos, but I have two sisters with tattoos, and I just find it very interesting to find out why people choose to aesthetically change their bodies in such a significant way. And the Maori people have a real sense of history with tattooing, but it's become very prevalent in our culture today. So it's really something that's very suitable for us to discuss in a course on aesthetics. Now let's look at second form of body augmentation. In ancient China, first upper class girls and then most girls, regardless of their class, had their feet broken and bound from around about the age of 4 or 5. This tiny foot was called the golden lotus and was a symbol of marriageability and modesty. Girls had to shuffle as they walked because the pain of this abnormally shaped foot really prevented them from having normal mobility. Some records show that these women couldn't walk at all, I suppose in extreme cases, and they literally had to be carried around by attendants. The idea is that if you're so rich that you don't need to walk, then that is a true sign of wealth indeed. Many lustful poems were written by men to espouse the sensuality of this golden lotus. And the real prize for women, what they were really going for, was to get a 7.5 centimeter foot. So if you have a ruler anywhere nearby, if you want to pause the video, go and have a look at what 7.5 centimeters is and compare that to your actual foot. Just if you want to see what it looks like, this is what the golden lotus looks like unbound. So obviously severe deformation, but again, it was considered a sign of beauty, and men really did write many poems about the beauty of the golden lotus. The next one I want to look at is a tribe in Africa. And our final body modification that I'm going to discuss is called the labret. And just like with the tattoos, you may recognize this facial modification in some way, as there are people that wear labrets in their lips in our modern Canadian society. The Mercy women actually often have to have several of their teeth removed to make room for this big terracotta disc, and it stretches the lip. If you look at the woman to the right over here, you'll actually see her lip without the labret in. So it's a permanent modification, but for the Mercy woman, it's actually a sign of beauty and again of marriageability. And they take great pride in having the biggest labret that they can get into their stretched lips. What do you think of these body modifications? Are any of them beautiful? What you're going to do in your journal entry is you're going to find an image of a body that was modified for beauty purposes, and it can be from anywhere in the world. I know a lot of you are probably going to want to do tattoos, but try and stretch yourself a bit to think of perhaps a different type of body modification. Or if you're going to go with tattoos, maybe see if you can find it from a different culture or for a different reason than just what your everyday Canadian would do it for. And then in a few sentences, state your opinion on whether you find your chosen modification aesthetically pleasing or not, and ensure that you include an image of an example of your chosen modification. So this is going to go into your journal entry. We're now going to consider a different aspect of the human body in art, and that is of the alienated body. The alienation is very much a modern topic, although it had been explored by a few artists in the past. With abstraction, it allowed modern artists to start manipulating form in order to articulate the human body in an exciting way. As you look at the following images, think about how they relate to the video we watched on the Venus of Willendorf. Remember, exaggeration. When you look at Henry Moore's sculpture, what is the first thing that comes to mind? Can you tell what you're looking at? Can you tell that this is an image of a woman? What shapes do you see that suggest that this is a woman? Perhaps you'll notice that there's breasts along with wide hips, but other than that, it doesn't look much like a woman to me. Can you identify the negative space in this image? We talked about negative space in our Visual Literacy Week. Where is this visual space and what shapes does it make? Do you think the negative space has any role to play in the shape and structure of this unique work? So when we look at negative space, we're looking at the spaces in between. So we're looking at the shapes here. We're looking at this shape. The shape here between the buttocks and along the legs. And also in some sense to this sort of little divot that's in this woman's head. Those are negative shapes. The next thing we're going to look at when thinking about alienation or even sort of hard to identify humans is Giacometti. And unlike Moore, Giacometti approaches the human form in a more realistic way. We can identify this fairly easily, but it's still abstracting the form by elongating and thinning out the limbs. The surface of his work is also very bumpy and a dark color. You can tell that if you went up and touched it, it would be very rough. The focus is very much on the physicality of the body, but there is a psychological loneliness. Do you feel that loneliness when you look at this image? The final artist we're going to look at is Lorna Simpson. What I like about her work is that she plays very much with the human body and with stereotypes and prejudices. In this work, which is entitled She, and you can notice up at the top she has given us some text. The word here is female. The gender of the sitter is very much in doubt, because when you first look at the image, you see in some sense a disembodied human because the head is kind of cut off, but you see up the part of the torso and the hands dressed in male clothing, and we are almost preconditioned to immediately presume that this is a male. But Lorna has given us a hint that this is actually a female. So the question is, why did she do this? What is it about not only clothing but also this sort of posture? I know if I had sat like this, my mother would have probably had a bit of a fit because it's not ladylike. Here she's sitting a little bit more like a female with her legs crossed. So Lorna Simpson's sort of challenging us and having us ask questions in her ambiguity, saying, well, why do we think this is a man? Okay, it's a woman. What does that mean? Should this woman be dressed this way? Should she sit this way? Well, why not? What's wrong with it? And so she's creating sort of a dialogue and a narrative where we can start to really think about the human body in a gender way. Now this image, I'm actually not going to tell you what it is about just yet. I'll tell you at the end. But it is by a Cuban artist. And what I'd like you to do is pause the video and have a really good look at this. Try and figure out what exactly is that happening in the image. I'm going to ask you to pause it for a moment, and then you're going to have a look at a next journal entry. Alright, so back at your journal, what I want you to do is I want you to think about this work. Alright, and for now, since you don't know what it's called, we're going to call it Felix's work. And I want you to write a paragraph where you think about this work and try and figure out, what is this? What is that lying on the floor? Where is this located? What is happening? Why is it happening? What is it about? And I really want your sort of unbiased opinion based on you not really knowing, because I think that is that sort of fresh first experience. You might want to keep in mind that our topic is in this section is sort of the alienated body, so perhaps that'll give you a clue. But make sure you get that in your journal entry, and later in this class I will make sure to give you a link so that you can look it up and go, ah. Our next section is going to be sex and reproduction. I don't feel any study of the human body would be complete without discussing sex and reproduction. In some ways, that's probably what people think the body is for. So, we're going to look at a few different issues and try and think about how sex and reproduction play in aesthetics and how artists actually show this body. Um, in ancient Greek and Roman times, the human body wasn't shameful. It was quite acceptable for a man to show his genitals. Women, not as much, but they definitely exposed their breasts. But coming into sort of medieval times and up to the Renaissance, there was the idea of this shameful nude, that exposing your genitals was part of sort of that religious sin that is shameful and that we must cover up our bodies. And so what happened is a lot of art sort of had this little fig leaf attached. And there's a great story of Queen Victoria whenever she went to visit the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. All the curators had to run around hanging little fig leaves in front of all the penises because Queen Victoria did not want to have her sensibilities offended by seeing genitalia. And then as soon as she left, they would take the little fig leaves off and you would see the statue in all its glory. This is a statue of David by Michelangelo, and he does not have a fig leaf right now. But many a poor statue has either been fig leafed or, even worse, castrated in some way in order to hide this shameful nude that people don't want to see. We are going to now think about the shameful nude and look at two paintings. You're going to watch a video. One is about The Birth of Venus by Cabanel, and the other is Luncheon on the Grass by Manet. The next pages will be continuing on in your lesson, and there will be questions for you to answer. Enjoy.